Let's begin the new chapter. Again, we're on page 19a, and the Mishnah is going to talk about the sacrifice, which is the korban mincha that was brought, and the different details of that korban mincha. And then it gets into the order of the ceremony, which ends up being an argument. It turns out it's an argument. Reb Shimon and the rabbis and the Mishnah and the Gemara, we're going to find there's also a third opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Now, the Mishnah begins with the husband taking the mincha and bringing it to the kohen, and at some point, or bringing it to the woman, and at some point the kohen gets it. So let's listen to the details. The owner, meaning the husband, would take her mincha mitoich kfifa mitzris, from this kfifa mitzris, the wicker basket, kfifa mitzaris or mitzris, and and he would place it. This is the owner doing this, because you didn't need a kohen yet, and he would place it into a klishares, a holy vessel, a vessel used to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. And he would place it on the woman's hand. In other words, bring it to his wife, give it to his wife. The kohen meniach yodoi mitachteha, or yodav mitachteha, yodoi meniach yodoi mitachteha, umenifa, or umenif. I see there's two different wordings here. If it's meniach s, the Bach adds the word s, and he also says menif mitachteha umenif. Umenif hanif. Umenif, excuse me, not menifa, menif. I'm not sure the dictuk, the grammar, why the Bach has to do that, but meniach es yodoi mitachteha, the kohen places his hand from under her hands, or from under it, umenif, and he, menifa, and menifa, I guess, would mean she waves it, so the Bach changes it to menif, as he waves it. However it is, the kohen his hands are under her hands, and they both are basically doing the waving. The waving is being done by the woman, who's we're suspecting her of having an affair, and the kohen. And we mentioned yesterday that there's a big question over here. Is it appropriate for the kohen to put his hands and touch this woman's hands? It doesn't seem that would be acceptable. And the Yerushalmi asks this question, and Tosfos brings it. He says it's kior. It's like it's not. It's disgusting. It's not right that the kohen should be. So the one point that the Yerushalmi makes is that there's a napkin, a mappa, some type of a cloth in between, and nevertheless it's not called a chatzitza. So again, the woman is holding the klishares, this vessel, this holy vessel, and the kohen wants to also hold it and wave it. So he puts his hands under hers, but they put in between a cloth, and it's not called a chatzitza. That's the first point. Then the Yerushalmi mentions that it's really, they use an elder kohen, that they don't use a young kohen that might have desires, but they use a kohen that's zokein, and therefore there will be less concern of him having thoughts, negative, evil, inappropriate and sinful thoughts. And then the Yerushalmi says, you could even say that it's a young kohen, but you don't have to worry about a yetzer hara for such a short moment. It's just a moment. They move it backwards and forwards and up and down and goodbye. It's done. So that's Tosfos mentions. We did see a commentary in the I think it was the Tosfos Harosh that mentioned that there could be an understanding that they both hold the kli, the vessel, at different parts. Like the woman's hand is more higher up, and the kohen's hand is on the bottom. So there was understanding. There was other options as well of how it could be, how to reconcile this with the tznius, with not the kohen holding. How was he holding it with her hands right there? Um, this is a Ritva, excuse me. Okay, the Ritva says that he didn't actually touch it. His hands were near hers, but he didn't touch her. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Um, oh, the Taisa Shan says, okay, the Ritva doesn't say it exactly like that. The Ritva says in the name of Yushalmi that the Kohen puts his hands under the hand of the woman. He puts his hand under the hand of the woman, right near it, but he doesn't touch her hand. And the hand of the woman is not called a chatzitza, and that's not a problem. And then they bring from the Taisa Shantz that you could say that they held it at different places, that the kohen held it on the bottom, and the woman holds it at the on the lip of the vessel above. And that would be the another way of getting around this problem. Okay. Anyway, that's the Mishnah's discussion of the kohen and the woman, the owner, waving the mincha. Now, the Mishnah then says, how do they do it? So there's these four things that have to be done. Heinif tenufa, which is the waving. Higish is the bringing it close, which we learned about in the previous chapter, that they would bring the vessel close to the corner of the Mizbeach. They didn't have to bring the actual mincha and bend it over to touch the Mizbeach, but they would bring the vessel close and have it touch the corner of the Mizbeach, the southwestern corner. And kamatz, the kohen would take a kamitza, 3 fingers full, the hit there, and then burn it on the mizbeach. And the rest would be eaten by the kohenim after they did the kamitza. That's when the kohenim are now permitted to eat the rest, the leftovers. Meaning that we have a bunch of big barley, an amount of barley here, and all they would burn on the mizbeach on the altar was only 3 fingers full, was only like a fistful, and even if it's not a full fist, so only 3 fingers full. And so the rest was eaten by the kohenim. Kohenim could eat it. Now, so here the Mishnah says, the opinion of the rabbis, that they would first give her to drink the Sota water, and afterwards he would bring the mincha sacrifice, the meal offering. Now, it does sound a little surprising, the flow in the Mishnah, and the Gemara is going to ask this. The Mishnah already said that he was maktir, he burned the kaimetz, the 3 fingers full, and now the Mishnah jumps backwards and says he would first give her to drink the Sota water, and afterwards he brings the 3 fingers full, the mincha, the sacrifice, the meal offering, brings it on the altar. So it does sound like it's not exactly written smoothly. It sounds like first we talk about the mincha, and then afterwards it says, by the way, you have to drink the water first. So it sounds like it does. So the Gemara asks this question. So don't be surprised. We'll soon see in the Gemara. But that is the opinion of the rabbis, that you first drink and afterwards you bring the mincha. Reb Shimon says it's the opposite. First he brings the korban mincha, the meal offering, and afterwards he gives her to drink. As it says, that after he does all those things, he gives the woman to drink the water. According to Reb Shimon, if he did it in the wrong order and he gave her to drink first and afterwards he brought the mincha, it's kshera, it is kosher after the fact. But the preferable way it's supposed to be done, according to Reb Shimon, is that you bring the meal offering first and afterwards you give her to drink. So let's just summarize what we learned here. We spoke about the fact that both the kohen and the woman are holding the mincha, and the husband was the one who brought the mincha from a kfifa mitzris, as this type of a basket, wicker basket. It was in it. They brought it and he puts it into the klishares. You don't need a kohen to put it in the klishares, and he gives it to his wife. Then the kohen puts his hands under hers. However, that's done according to the Yerushalmi. We had different understandings how it's done exactly in order not to be inappropriate touching. But then it was the way that's called the tenufa, the waving, and then the kohen would bring it close to the altar, to the corner of the altar, and he would take a kamitza, do the fingers full, he would burn it on the mizbeach, and then the rest was eaten by the kohenim, and then we had a machlokes, the Rabbanon and Reb Shimon, as to what the order is. Do you first, the Rabbanon held you first give her to drink the water, and afterwards you bring the carbon mincha. And the opinion of Reb Shimon is that it's the opposite. You first bring the meal offering, the carbon mincha, and afterwards you give her to drink the water. And Reb Shimon brings a pasuk. It's interesting, the Mishnah does not bring a pasuk for the rabbis. They bring a pasuk for Reb Shimon. Possibly, I'm just sharing a thought, maybe because the pasuk in the verse, there is a verse that says vehishka before it says bring the mincha. Vehishka means to give her to drink, and only afterwards it says you bring the mincha offering, the meal offering. So maybe according to the rabbis, it's obvious. I don't even need to show you in the verse, because the verse very clearly has vehishka. It mentions drinking first, and only afterwards mentions the mincha. So if you just read that, you sort of automatically know the order. The rabbis are sort of following the flow of the verses. Now, what I'm telling you is not perfect. It's not a perfect answer, because the truth is, if you continue reading the flow of the verses, it knocks you off, because it tells you to give her to drink after. It also mentions, again, give her to drink, even after it says bring the mincha. So maybe my answer is not a perfect answer, but possibly it's still good, because the fact is, from the flow of the verses, you do seem to get the impression from the first, at least when you're reading it, you get the impression that you first give her to drink, and then you bring the carbon mincha. So that would be the rabbi's understanding. So then the rabbis don't even need to bring a pasuk. Reb Shimon needs to explain himself, so he brings a pasuk that it says v'achar yashke. So he's explaining the meaning of this pasuk, even though it does say v'hishka first, but it does say afterwards v'achar yashke, which gives an understanding v'achar afterwards you should give her to drink. Sounds like maybe first do the mincha and then give her to drink. So that's Reb Shimon's reason. Again, what my point of discussion was, why does the Mishnah only bring a verse for Reb Shimon? Why doesn't it bring a verse for the rabbis? That was the issue that was that I was sharing a thought. Okay, now we're up to the Gemara. The Gemara says, Amalei Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Yoshia Didare. Rebbe Elazar said to Rebbe Yoshia of his generation, and the reason why it mentions Rebbe Yoshia of his generation, we said yesterday, was that there was another Rebbe Yoshia who was a Tana, and very famous Tana, Rebbe Yoshia. And the Gemara wants to make it clear that who is Rebbe Elazar going to talk in this way. He mentions to him an interest, like he uses a line that maybe is not so appropriate to use for someone who's a big scholar that's older, that Rebbe Yoshia. So instead, he speaks to someone in his caliber, Rebbe Yoshia of his generation, and he says these words again. The wording is a little, so he says, don't sit on your legs until you explain me this. So you don't know, I guess you wouldn't normally say such a line, like don't sit down until you explain me this. You don't tell that to a Rebbe, you tell that to a colleague. So therefore the Gemara explains this, Rebbe Elazar telling Rebbe Yoshia of his generation, not the Rebbe Yoshia that's older. Now, he says, Minayin lamincha Sota. So he wants him to explain something to him. This is Rebbe Elazar asking Rebbe Yoshia, explain this to me. How do you know a Sota needs tenufa waving? How do we know we have to wave the mincha, the meal offering? Minayin lamincha Sota shetuna tenufa. How do you know it needs to be waved? Menolon, Rebbe Yoshia asked back, you want to know how you know it? What do you mean? The pasuk. You can't. You're that ignorant. The pasuk says clearly, "Vehenif." You have to wave it. It's a clear verse. Of course, you have to wait. It has to be waved. It says clearly, "Vehenif." That means the kohen would have to wave it. Yeah, let me tell you the pasuk. By the way, the pasuk, the whole verse is v'lakach kohen miyado isha. The kohen takes it from the hand of the woman as minchas haknois, this meal offering of the warning. The henef, and he waves as hamincha of Hashem. He waves the mincha before Hashem. And then he brings it as a sacrifice. He brings it close to the altar. Now, the Gemara explains, or I should say, Rabbi Elazar explains his question. B'mbailim minolon. How do we know that the owner is supposed to be waving it? The pasuk basically just says the kohen waves the Sota, this meal offering of the Sota. So how do you know that the owner, meaning the woman, how do we know that she is supposed to wave it? So the Gemara answers, Asya yad yad mishlamim. We do have a gzeda shava. We have a source that it says somewhere else yad, and it says here yad. Where does it say yad elsewhere? It says it by shlamim, the peace offering. So it talks about a peace offering, and it says that there has to be a waving, means the husband has to wave it. So here also, where it says yad, the Sota meal offering, it also has to be waved by the owner. So meaning the Sota, you see that you have to wave, the kohen has to wave it. Shlamim, you see the owner has to wave it. So what we do is we compare the laws, and not only compare the laws, we share the laws from each of them. So Ksiv, it says over here, by Sota, the kohen takes from the hand of the woman, and he takes the mincha, the meal offering, and he waves it. So it says here clearly that the kohen waves it. Ksiv Hasan, it says over there, by the shlamim, the peace offering, yadav tiviana, that his hands shall bring it. And over there, the pasuk says, Lohanef oisai tunufa. That whole pasuk is yadav tiviana isishay Hashem. His hands will bring the fire offering to Hashem, the chelev, the fat, al chaza on the chest. Yaviana, he brings it, Esa chaza, the chest, lahanef oisai tunufa, to wave it before Lifnei Hashem. So when it's talking about the waving there, basically says clearly that it's his hands bringing it to wave it before Hashem. And the implication is that he's the one who's waving it. Why is he bringing it close? He's bringing it close to do the waving. So it brings it this way to do the waving. So the understanding is that you need the bilim, you need the hands of the owner, and here it says the kohen. So makan kohen, just like over here by Sota, it says clearly kohen. The kohen waves. So apla halon kohen. So we learn from this. It says yad here, and it says yad by shlamim. So there also it means the kohen has to wave it. Umal halon bailam, just like over there, it's talking about the owners. Afkan bailam, here also it's talking about the owner has to wave it. And here, when we talk about the owner, we are talking about the woman. Now, the Gemara now says, so how do you do it? That he places his hand, the kohen places his hand under the hands of the owner, and meinif, and he waves it. So that's the answer to this problem, to this question. Why do you have two people waving it? The pasuk only says one, only says the kohen. The answer is it's a gzera shava from shlamim. And the truth is the same thing as with shlamim. Shlamim also, it implies only one person is waving it. And we have a gzera shava from Sota, that you have to have both. You have to have the kohen and the owner. Okay, now comes the next line of the Mishnah. V'heinef, v'higish, kamatz, v'chulu, etc. He waves it, he brings it close, he takes a kamitza, 3 fingers full, and he's going to burn it on the altar. And then the Mishnah jumps backwards and says he would give her to drink the water, and afterwards he would bring the sacrifice. The Gemara asks, this sacrifice, it was already brought. You just said the 4 things were done, and one of them was to bring it as a sacrifice. It was, you did kamitza, and you did vihik there. You brought it. So what are you telling me now? You give her to drink and then bring it. So the Gemara answers, this is what it means to say. What is the order of the actual mincha, regular minchas, the way a mincha is done? So it explains the order of a mincha. And what does it say? and the order of and really the order of this mincha of the mincha saita, but how is it done? So we're first talking. We're focusing in, zooming in on the actual bringing of the mincha part. So how is the mincha done for the saita? Ketzad, how so? Heinef v'higish kamatz v'hikta. You do those four things. You do tnufa, you do the waving, you do the bringing close, you do the kaimetz, you do the kaktara, the burning, v'hashar nechal kainim, and the rest is eaten by the kainim. So then it says Lashko gufa pligi Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan, and then the Mishnah jumps backwards because it really was not dealing with the entire ceremony of the Saita. We were only talking about the actual korban, mincha. And now we're going to talk about the entire ceremony. So we mentioned that, that when it comes to the hashkah, there is an argument. When it comes to the drinking, there's an argument. Hashkah gufa, pligi Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan, what the order is. When it comes to the drinking, there's actually an argument what the order is. The rabbis hold you first give her to drink and then bring the mincha. Reb Shimon Savar, Reb Shimon holds you bring the meal offering and afterwards you give her to drink the saita water shenemar, as it says v'yachar yashke. So that's the Gemara's answer. It is a little surprising that the Gemara is so bothered with this, and what exactly is the Gemara's answer to it, that we were really just focusing on the korban mincha itself, and only afterwards we talk about the entire ceremony. That's what the Gemara is basically answering. In other words, it's a little vague what the emphasis in the Gemara's answer is. Is the answer that we were only focusing on the korban first, and now we're going to talk about the entire thing? Or is the Gemara's answer that we're only focusing on the korban, and it actually is an argument if that comes first or not? Meaning that it could be that it comes first, according to the opinion of Reb Shimon. So we're not dealing with it. In other words, the fact that Reb Shimon holds this way, is that what allows us to put the Mishnah in this order? Or does it not have to do with Reb Shimon, and just the fact that we weren't really dealing with the whole ceremony, we were only dealing with the korban mincha? That's why we can do it this way. Again, I'm not exactly sure how the Gemara, what the specific meaning of the Gemara's answer, which one of those options it is. And it seems like you could learn it both ways. Is it in Rashi? He says, he emphasizes that we weren't talking about hashkah. We weren't dealing with hashkah at all. Sounds like he's saying, like the first way I said, we're talking about the mincha saita. And when you're going to bring it, when you're going to bring it, you do it like that. And then it mentions about the order, which sounds like the first way I was saying. The other option is it could be that the Mishnah is sort of relying on the fact that, according to Reb Shimon, it actually is the right order. The Mishnah is saying it in the right order. And meaning because, according to the one opinion, that is correct, that you do it that way. You first bring the mincha, and then you give her to drink. So, in other words, the Gemara could mean that Ashkal Gufa, there's actually an argument, and one opinion holds that this is first. I guess from the language of Rashi, it sounds like the first way. It sounds like the first way that I was mentioning. That just we're not dealing with the drinking. Okay, now we're up to the next piece of Gemara. V'im hishka v'yacha kachikra bas minchasa ksheba. If he gave her to drink and afterwards he brought the mincha, it is kosher according to Reb Shimon. So this was a very interesting line that he says, that although I say you have to do it in this order, but if you did it in the wrong order, still going to be kosher. This is the preferable way is to do it with the you first bring the mincha and then afterwards you give her the drink. Did it the wrong order, it's still going to be kosher. Tanu Rabbanan, we turn the page now. We're on page 19b. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in the Brisa, and it says vihishka. It says that he gives her to drink, and that we're talking here the first vihishka. And Matamad Leimer, why does it say the first vihishka that he gives her to drink? And it mentions it before the mincha, before the meal offering. It mentions vihishka gives her to drink. V'haloik varnamar vihishka, it says later on vihishka, which is the main vihishka, which is that you first bring the mincha offering, and then afterwards you give her to drink. So it's going to say, it already tells us the order. It doesn't mean it says it earlier, but it says it already about the order with the other vihishka, the later vihishka. And so why does it say vihishka here? Why does it say in the beginning that you give her to drink? So the Gemara answers, the Brisa explains itself, and this is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. That Rabbi Akiva says that if the Megillah was erased, and she says, I refuse to drink the water, vihishka, we do it against her will. V'maranaisa, we force her, mashkanaisa bal karcha, and we give her to drink against her will. We force her to have this water. Even in a case where the Megillah was erased, before they brought the carbon mincha, even in that case, Rabbi Akiva holds that you force her to drink it against her will. They did it wrong. They did it in the wrong order, according to Rabbi Akiva. And even in such a case, even if they gave her to drink first, meaning they erased it first, they didn't give her to drink first. They erased it first. Then they brought the mincha, and we are still going to force her to drink it. And even though she says, I refuse to drink it, if she doesn't say she's guilty, we force her to drink it against her will. That's the words of Rabbi Akiva. So again, what Rabbi Akiva is basically saying is that the last vihishka tells you the right order, that you first do the mincha first. You're officially supposed to do the meal offering first. And the last time it says vihishka is that's the main thing, that you give her to drink later on, afterwards, after you brought the mincha. In the first vihishka, you learn from there that you erase you're going to be writing the scroll into the water, erasing it in the water, and you give her to drink this water, even if she says and refuses to drink it, you force her to drink it. And even if it was written in the wrong order, meaning that they should have waited till after the mincha, but nevertheless, we still give her to drink it against her will. That's the words of Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Shimon agrees with Rabbi Akiva in the halacha, what the order. This because we saw it in the Mishnah. Saying that Rabbi Shimon is the same view of Rabbi Akiva, that you're supposed to really bring the mincha first and afterwards give her to drink, and that's what Rabbi Akiva was saying. But they argue at how to darshan, how to explain the verses, and we'll see there is slight differences. We'll soon see even in halacha. Rabbi Shimon Aimer v'yachar yashke. So Rabbi Shimon says the main thing is the words v'yachar yashke, that it says in the again it says it 3 times about giving her to drink. The middle time is v'yachar yashke, and that word v'yachar yashke, it does actually implies like after they bring the mincha, you give her to drink. Before I continue, I really should just tell you all 3 psukim. The first pasuk that it talks about the Sota water, it says he writes the curses and he erases them into the water and he gives her to drink. That's drinking number 1. He gives her to drink. And we saw Rabbi Akiva says, you know what that means? That once they erase it into the water, you force her to drink it. And Rabbi Akiva says, even if they put it in the water, they wrote it in the wrong order. They should have first brought the mincha offering. Even then, when it comes the right time to give her to drink, which is later at the end, you give her to drink, even though they wrote it and erased it before the mincha offering was offered. Nevertheless, you give v'hishka. They wrote it, you got to give her to drink. They wrote it and they erased it, you got to give her to drink. That's the first pasuk v'hishka. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, they would force her mouth open if necessary, and that reminds me that the death penalty of Strafe, which involved pouring molten metal down somebody's throat. They used to force the person's mouth open.
Right. Correct. Yes. Yeah, it is similar. So we have the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Now, and about the first pasuk v'hishka. The opinion of Reb Shimon, he's going to say, you know why it says v'hishka first? Because it says v'hishka, the first v'hishka teaches you that if you did it in the wrong order, it's valid. That's what he uses it for. That if you actually gave her to drink in the wrong order, you didn't just write it and erase it, but you even gave her to drink in the wrong order, it's actually valid. So that's the first v'hishka. So it talks about you wrote it, you erased it, you gave her to drink. That's one. The next time it talks about giving her to drink, it says you bring the mincha, you do all that stuff with the mincha, the kaimetz and the hagasha. You did all the ceremony with the meal offering. The achar yashka, and afterwards you got to give her to drink. And then it says after that v'hishka the third time. You give the water to drink, and if she turns out that she had an affair, it will cause her to explode. So you got the three v'hishkas here. And so Reb Shimon says the main one is v'achar yashka. It says v'achar yashka. It says in the pasuk afterwards, this is the middle one. Ma tamalim. Why does it say the middle one? V'haloik v'arnemar v'hishka. It actually says v'hishka in the third hishka. It says already, meaning that we could know from the third one that is that you give her to drink after you bring the meal offering, because you see it in the third one is after the meal offering, which was much earlier on in the verses. And so what do you need v'achar yashke? So the Reb Shimon says, you know why it says v'achar yashke? Afterwards you give her to drink? Because Reb Shimon says that la'achar kol maisim kulon ha'amurim l'mayla. Everything that was above is supposed to be done first before you give her to drink. Magid gimel dvarim ma'akvin ba. This teaches that three things are preventing, meaning you need to have these three things before you give her to drink. Number one is ad shalei karav hakoimetz. Before you brought the meal offering, the 3 fingers full meal offering, you first have to do that before she drinks. V'ad shalei nimcha Megillah, and before the Megillah was erased, you can't give her to drink. You got to first erase the Megillah before you give her to drink. V'ad shalei tekabel aleh shvua, before she accepts on herself the vow, the oath, and the curse, you do not give her to drink until that point. That first she needs that. First she has to have all these 3 things before you give her to drink. This is Reb Shimon's opinion, and that's what he learns because it says v'achar yashke. Now, the understanding of Reb Shimon seems to be that when it says afterwards you give her to drink, Reb Shimon says, you know what that means? It means all the things that we mentioned before, after all of them. The other rabbis don't seem to understand it that way. After something, you give her to drink. But Reb Shimon says, no, afterwards, you give her to drink. Afterwards means after all of that. So he learns you need these 3 things that were mentioned before. You can't give her to drink before they erase the scroll. You can't give her to drink before they bring the mincha offering. And And you can't give her a drink before she accepts the oath, the vow. So that's how the Reb Shimon understands that v'achar means after everything, you give her a drink. He seems to understand it that way. That's like very inclusive. You got to include all the things are part of this idea. Now, the thing that the problem with Reb Shimon is that what happens if you did it in the wrong order? You gave her to drink before you brought the mincha. So we saw in the Mishnah already that it actually is valid. And that's what he learns from the first Vihishka. It actually works. So it is interesting, the terminology here in the Gemara, where it says that there's three things that are ma'akev, that prevent her from drinking. And it sounds like if you didn't do it in the right order, you gave her to drink before the kaimetz, it sounds like it's invalid. It's ma'akev. Ma'akev makes it sound like it's invalid. So you have to read this loosely. The commentaries say that ma'akev over here doesn't mean that it doesn't work if you messed up. It means that this is the preferable order. These things are important to do before you drink the Sota water. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be invalid, because we know Rabbi Shimon holds that one of the cases is not invalid after the fact. So it uses the term ma'akev, that it's it doesn't have to be this way, that it's invalid if you didn't do it this way. So that's the understanding here. So, but you're supposed to do these three things before you give her to drink, because it says v'achar yashke, afterwards you give her to drink. Okay, so let's go through each of these three things. So the Gemara continues, this Bryce, I should say, continues, and it says, we are holding about 7 lines from the top of the page. Ad Shalai, maybe eight lines from the top of the page. Ad Shalai Karavat Kaimetz, 19b, 8 lines from the top of the page. Ad Shalai Karavat Kaimetz, Reb Shimon L'Taimei, that you can't give her to drink until you bring the Kaimetz. That's Reb Shimon's reason that he says in our Mishnah. Again, we're learning a brisa here. The argument of Reb Shimon and Rabbi Akiva, we're in a brisa here on page 19b. But in 19a, we had the Mishnah, which said the opinion of Reb Shimon and the rabbis. 19b is the opinions of Reb Shimon and Rabbi Akiva in the brisa. So in this brisa, we're speaking about Rabbi Akiva. We mentioned that we know Rabbi Shimon's reason of that, one of the things that you really are supposed to do first is bring the mincha. That makes sense because Rabbi Shimon's reason is the Amar Makruves Minchasav Achikach Mashke. He said in the Mishnah that you bring the meal offering and afterwards you give her to drink. Now, what about the other point he mentions? Ad Shalai Nimchaka Megillah, that you can't give her to drink until you erase the Megillah. The Gemara asks, now that doesn't sound like a very big insight. You can't give her to drink the water until you erase the Megillah. What else? What's she going to drink? Some water? What are you giving her to drink? Just plain water? Elamai mashkala. What are you giving her to drink? Of course you have to erase the Megillah in it. Of course it's not going to work if you just give her plain spring water. Amar Rav Ashi says, it's not needed, but rather it's talking about a certain case, not just that you need to erase it. That's just a case that the mark is still recognizable on the parchment and you didn't erase it fully, that you can't give her to drink. You really have to wait till you erase the parchment fully in order to give her to drink. And that's the second point that Rabbi Shimon made in this brisa, was that you first need to bring the mincha, the meal offering. You first need to erase all the letters fully into the water, and you can't have any mark of any ink left on the parchment. It has to be totally erased into the water. And then the third thing was that you don't give her to drink until she accepts on herself the vow that she is claims innocence and that she is going to get the curse if she sinned, if she had an affair. So the Gemara is bothered with this point of Reb Shimon because it doesn't seem to be at all applicable. How would you ever need to, how would you reach this stage where she wants to drink it, but she didn't accept the oath yet? It's impossible, such a thing. You can't have such a case where she wants to drink it, but she didn't, because they don't write it until she accepts the oath. So the whole writing that you don't have a Sota water until she accepts the oath, and then they write it and then they put it in. And if she didn't, if they wrote it beforehand, it would invalidate it, and so it wouldn't be Sota water. So this third point doesn't seem to be so important to mention because it's so obvious. So because of another technical issue that you wouldn't reach this stage of even considering it if it didn't happen. So that's what the Gemara asks. It says, you can't drink it until until she accepts the vow. She can't drink the water. But you could write it before she accepts the vow? But didn't Rava say Megillah Sota shekosva kodim shetkabel ala shvua like klum? The Sota scroll that was written before she accepted the oath, it's not worth anything. So obviously, there needs to be an acceptance of the oath before you drink the water. It's like impossible to have a case where you would have Sota water that's kosher, Sota water, before she accepts the oath. So you don't have to tell me that, oh, you know what you need to do before you drink the water? You need her to accept the oath. You can't have Sota water without her accepting the oath. It's impossible to have such a entity. You don't have Sota water. The only way to have Sota water is if she accepts the oath. Then you could write on the scroll, and if you then write on the scroll, you can erase that into water. You could have Sota water. There has to be a acceptance of the oath. So there's no case where she's going to be drinking the Sota water without acceptance of the oath. You just wouldn't work. So the more answer is you're right, Kadinas, but that was mentioned for no reason. We don't have to say that because it's obvious. You need to accept the oath to even get Sota water. So obviously you need to accept the oath before she drinks the Sota water. You won't be able to have it. But it's extra, it's Kadinas, but for nothing, it just mentioned it. But it's not really necessary to say that. Now, so this basically tells us Reb Shimon's main point that you need to first bring the meal offering. And it seems like an additional point that he's making is you need to first erase everything before you drink the water. So we've got these 2 points that basically Reb Shimon is learning from because it says v'achar yashke. Okay. Now, the Gemara says, B'maika miflagi. So what is the argument in the Mishnah? B'maika miflagi. Again, we have an argument in the Mishnah, Reb Shimon and the Rabbanon. We have an argument in the Brisa, Reb Shimon and Rabbi Akiva. Reb Shimon and Rabbi Akiva seem to hold the same halachas, but they did learn a little differently the way they learned the verses. One of them, Reb Shimon, made a big deal out of the Achar Yashka, and Rabbi Akiva made a big deal out of the final Vihishka. That was but it comes out according to both of them that you first bring the meal offering and afterwards you give her to drink. So now the Gemara is asking, B'maika miflagi, what is the argument in the Mishnah between the rabbis and Reb Shimon? B'maika miflagi. So there's 3 verses which I did mention a few minutes ago. Vihishka kama. There's one Vihishka that we call it the first Vihishka. V'achar yashka, and then it says afterwards she drinks. That's the middle, that I will call the middle hashka, the middle drinking. Vihishka, and they give her to drink basra, the final one. So that's called the last one, the final Vihishka. It says in that same paragraph that it talks about Sota, it says Vihishka a 3rd time. So Rabban and Savri, the rabbis understand, and keep in mind, we're going back now to the Mishnah, and the rabbis were of the opinion that you first give her to drink, and then afterwards you bring the meal offering. And I mentioned to you that it could be that the rabbis, the reason the Mishnah doesn't even say a verse is because if you look at the verses, at least the beginning verses of the Sota paragraph, you sort of see what the rabbis say right there. It says you give her to drink, and then it mentions about the meal offering. So it does sound a little like the rabbis are saying, Rabbanan Savri Vihishka Kama Lugufai. The first Vihishka is telling you that that's the order. You give her to drink. That's what it says. It says it right there in the beginning. Look, tells her that you first give her to drink, and afterwards you bring her mincha, her meal offering, which is only done afterwards. Again, it's the opposite of Reb Shimon and Rabbi Akiva. This is the rabbis. And that's why it says vehishka first, because you first give her to drink before you do that, before you bring the meal offering. The achar yashka. Why does it say afterwards? And this is a little complicated of how the rabbis are going to learn this. V'achar yashka, what are they going to do with that? Because it does sound from the words v'achar yashka, afterwards you give her to drink. So the Gemara answers that that's miboy, that the rabbis use that for, it's needed for l'sharishumay nikr, that only after it's erased completely can you give her to drink. That's what it means, v'achar yashka. And after it's completely erased, then you could give her to drink the Sota water. Vihishka Basra, what do the rabbis do with the final Vihishka? So that if they erased the scroll and she refuses to drink, we force her to drink it. So that's the way the rabbis learn all three verses. Reb Shimon Savar, what is Reb Shimon? How does he hold? How does he learn the verses? V'yacha yashka l'gufay. It says v'yacha yashka. He uses that as the main source. The middle time it says to give her to drink, he uses that as the most important one, telling you that after you bring the meal offering, that's when you give her to drink. After you did all those things, which includes the meal offering, then you give her to drink only after you brought that meal offering. Vihishka Kama, the first Vihishka, what do you use that for? We saw that in the Mishnah, that the first Vihishka, we didn't see the source of it. I mentioned the source of it. It's because it says Vihishka once before, but the Brisa, the Gemara here spells it out, that you see that from that Vihishka. The first Vihishka, that it works if you did give her to drink, it's still kshera, it still works if you gave her to drink before you brought the meal offering. And Vihishka Basra, what do you use? The final Vihishka, Shim Nimchuka Megilav Amrei Nishaisa, if she refuses to drink, Ma'arin Oisa, we force her, Mashka Noisa, we give her to drink Bal Korcha against her will. So that is the way Reb Shimon learns all three psukim. And the Gemara here asks, what do the rabbis do with Reb Shimon's understanding? Maybe, the rabbis should see from Reb Shimon, like maybe that sounds better. Rabbanan, what do the rabbis say about that? I guess maybe because the word v'achar yashka does give a strong validity to the opinion of Reb Shimon. Afterwards, he gives the drink. It sounds maybe like, you got a point there. So the rabbis answer, b'diavad le pasach kra. That b'diavad, after the fact, you don't start, you don't start a paragraph with a case of, if you did it wrong, it's kosher. You know what I mean? It's like you give someone an order. By the way, use the milchik cups for your milk, and if you by mistake put cold milk in a fleisha cup, it's kosher. But you don't start off the sentence saying, if you put the milk in the fleisha cup, it's okay. Please put the milk in a milcha cup. That's not the way you normally. So the Torah tells you that vehishka, you give her to drink, and then it says bring the meal offering. What does Reb Shimon say? Reb Shimon says, you know what that's saying? That if you did it in that order, you shouldn't. But if you did it, it's kosher. That's what the pasuk is really saying. That if you did it the wrong order, it's kosher. The rabbis say that's not the normal. That wouldn't be a way to start a paragraph about Sota. That the reason why it says v'hishka is because that's the right order. That's the way it's supposed to be. You don't start off a paragraph saying, if you did it wrong, it's kosher. Now let me tell you the right way to do it. It just doesn't. But the pasuk is not going to tell you if you, after the fact, if you did it this way, it's okay. But let me tell you the right way. The rabbis don't think that that's the that would be the way to start a. So they don't learn that way. They don't learn like Reb Shimon, because the pasuk would not be starting off with a case of b'diavad after the fact. Okay, now the Gemara mentions this. Goes back to Rabbi Akiva, the earlier brisa. The Sava Rabbi Akiva mashkenoisa bal karcha. Does Rabbi Akiva really hold that you give the woman to drink against her will? V'hatanya, didn't we learn in a brisa? Rabbi Yehuda says, kalbos shel barzel. There was a iron teeth. Kalbos had teeth, some type of a instrument that was made out of iron, it says, and it's a kalbos, that it had some teeth that they would place, 2 teeth, and they would place this into her mouth to hold it open. Kalbos shel barzel matilan l'sechbiyah, they place it in her mouth, shev nimchel Megillah, because if they did erase the Megillah and she refuses to drink, we force her to drink it. So this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that there's a way you get. How do you force a woman to drink? Very easy. You stick something in her mouth that holds it open. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, "Klum anu tzrichen el labaytka." Rabbi Akiva says, do you really need to do that? All we need to do is test if she sinned. So if she refuses to drink, do you really need to stick this thing in her mouth and all? If she refuses? If she refuses to drink, it means she sinned. That means she had an affair. She's checked. There's no need to give her to drink now. When she says, I refuse to drink, Rabbi Akiva says, that's it. It's a done deal. We have our answer. That she's answered our question already. When she refuses to drink, it's like, okay, we get you. We got it. We understand you very well. You had an affair, and that's why you're refusing to drink. Okay, no need for you to drink now. We're all set. So this is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Now he adds an interesting thing to it. He says, Ella, rather, if they haven't brought the meal offering, she is allowed to retract and say, I'm not going to drink it. Misha karaba kaimetz, but once they do bring the kaimetz, the meal offering, which is the 3 fingers full of the meal offering, and they bring that on the mizbeach, on the altar, but she can no longer retract. We consider her, we know what the story is. So that is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara is asking that this doesn't seem to flow well with the previous brisa, where the previous brisa mentioned that we force her to drink it, and he learned it out because it says v'hishka, that it really doesn't need to say v'hishka, and the reason why it says it is because that we force her to drink it, and basically that was the statement in the brisa that was on the top of the page, and the first time it says v'hishka is telling you that we force her to drink it. And the Gemara is asking that we have Rabbi Akiva's view that he says if she refuses, we sort of know we don't need to force her to drink it. So the Gemara asks, that sounds like a good contradiction, except that Rabbi Akiva adds this extra line to what he said. Ulataimech, the Gemara says, according to your reasoning, tikshi lach he gufa. We should ask this itself on Rabbi Akiva. His statement itself seems to contradict his own opinion. Because in this one statement that we have from Rabbi Akiva that you don't need to test a woman who refuses, he himself says there are cases where you test her, there are cases where you don't. It depends if they brought the meal offering. Well, the Taimech, according to your reason, we should ask this itself. That Rabbi Akiva himself says once they bring the meal offering, she can't retract. What does that mean? Isn't she? Don't we know already? Once she says she doesn't want to drink it, we already know. So what do you need to tell me that she can't retract? She's already tested. Why can't she retract? Why do we force her to drink it if they brought the meal offering? We know already she sinned. This is the Rebbe Akiva's view. You just said that we know if she sinned, if she refuses, and then you say that there is a case where we don't let her refuse to drink it. We force her to drink it. How could you say such a thing? She's already. We know that she sinned. So the Gemara answers like kasha hadaka hadra ba machmas resisa v'hadaka hadra ba machmas priyusa. There's a difference if she is retracting because she's afraid, or she's retracting even though she is not nervous at all. If she's retracting because of fear, and this is what it means. If she looks comfortable and she's not nervous, she does not drink the water ever. She says, I'm not drinking it. We know you sinned. That's what we tell her. You tell her, yeah, we got you. We understand. You had an affair. You're not drinking it. Okay, no problem. Don't drink it. You're fine. Because she's not nervous and she says, I'm not drinking it, we don't give her to drink. Machmas resisa, if she's nervous, then it depends. Actually, if they didn't bring the meal offering, which means they didn't erase the Megillah yet, Inami imchak Megillah, just like a din of it, or if they did erase it, they didn't do the right thing, they erased it early. The Kaihanim did it wrong. Demaki Matzi Hadraba, she can still retract. We let her refuse. If they brought the meal offering, the bedin avid kayanim, the machki, and the kayanim erased it. They properly, once they brought it, the bedin avid kayanim the machki, that they erased the water properly, meaning because the kaimetz was brought. So then loimatzi hadraba, then she cannot retract, and we force her to drink it. And why do we force her to drink it? Don't we know she sinned? No, because she's nervous to drink it. It's not because she's comfortable. If she was comfortable, you're right, we know she sinned. If she's nervous, then we do force her to drink it. Okay, we're going to stop here. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. Sei gesund. Mit Hashem, Sunday to be continued.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye. Thank
Good
you.
Shabbos, everybody.
Good Shabbos.
Mazel tov to Shana.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.